Welcome to the NC Spin After Spin. Additional comments from our panelists just available on our website. I want to ask each of you, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show, but you didn't? Chris Fitzsimon, I'll start with you.
Well, I tried to make the point, but I think I was trying to say too much in the answer when you ask about the decisions about HB2. But I actually think it's interesting because I think it has a big impact on the election. The Monmouth poll that was released this past week showed a significant majority of North Carolinians think HB2 is bad for North Carolina. Some people who even support the law think it's damaged North Carolina's reputation across the country. And I was really struck this past week by the comments I mentioned from Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest. Whatever you think of the bathroom issue, the Republicans are painting themselves into a corner by being perceived, and I think rightly in many cases, as anti-LGBT people. And Brad talked about all the new young voters coming to North Carolina. They are completely befuddled as to why one political party would not want to protect people from discrimination based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. This issue is not going to go away, and the Republicans, I think, are out of sync with a significant number, a majority of North Carolinians. It's going to continue to hurt them.
One of those polls showed that this was the big issue hurting Pat McCrory.
Well, I think the perception that, well, I think it's correct, but comments from Lieutenant Governor Forrest and others that are so extreme and out of the mainstream are not making their job any easier.
Bob Orr, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, it's somewhat what we were just talking about with Chris. I think Governor McCrory got boxed into having to defend HB2 when it really should have been the legislature out there in front defending it. And I do think it's hurting him to a degree, but what it's also doing is you don't hear about any of the real positive things like the Connect NC $2 billion bond referendum that his leadership pushed through. And so these unaffiliated swing voters, unfortunately, are focusing on the wrong issue and the wrong message from Governor McCrory's campaign.
So it's unduly influencing.
Yeah, I think so, and they're not hearing the positive message of the things that he's accomplished.
Brad, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, legislative redistricting, and we were talking about it during the commercial break, where, you know, if we don't have a stimulus from the recent unconstitutional rulings on our legislative districts and all the rulings that you cited during the show in Greensboro and Wake County, our congressional districts, the system of redistricting is broken. And what's sad, Tom, is that I don't see the leadership from either party willing to go and try and sit down and find a compromise to set a structure going into 2021 when we have to redo this process that can help maybe take some of the politics out of it. Judge Orr talked about the fact the Democrats used that stick for almost 40 years. So, you know, not having balance between the two parties in legislative redistricting is the pot calling the kettle black. So, you know, we need to lift ourselves up, find some statesmen who can help do that and say, let's find a system of an independent redistricting commission that can do it. And maybe, I don't think, John was right, you won't ever take all the politics of it, but maybe you can elevate it to a point where it's not the politicians picking their voters, but truly the voters picking their politicians.
John, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, Tom, I'm not inclined to participate because I think that last week's show was so perfect.
You said everything you wanted to say.
I'm surprised these
guys.
That's
the first time in 18 years that's happened.
Thought that there was anything else to say that we didn't already film. But having said that, what I would say is that just as Brad is suggesting that learning from these court decisions, learning from the constant turmoil about redistricting ought to motivate some change and bipartisan change. I actually think the same is true about election laws. After we've been through all these years of argument, the truth of the matter is there was always opportunities to make some arrangements, get some bipartisan votes on some things. I clearly recall a moment some years ago when Deborah Ross, who's now running for the U.S. Senate, was in the North Carolina House, and she and I were talking about this, and they were talking about creating same-day voter registration and a variety of other things. And she said, do you think the Republicans would vote for an omnibus bill, basically, of election law changes if it included a photo ID requirement? I said, well, maybe. Y'all ought to talk about that. Of course, they could have structured it in a way that the photo ID requirement was included in lots of ways to get people IDs if they didn't have them. There was an opportunity, and there may still be in the future an opportunity to work through some of these election law changes in a more bipartisan way. At least I hope so.
Good. Well, thanks for watching the After Spin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.